The emergency signal traveled across 10,000 star systems in less than a day, and every spacefaring civilization in the Galactic Coalition received the same message at the same time. The Veldaran Empire had broken the treaty. Admiral Kim Tai-Hyan stood in his quarters aboard the orbital station above Earth and watched the message play on his screen for the third time. The holographic display showed burning cities and destroyed fleets. The Veldaran had conquered 17 star systems in 6 months, and they showed no signs of stopping. Their ships moved through space like a plague, and everything they touched turned to ash. The Coalition was calling for war. Tai-Hyan was 62 years old, and he had fought in 3 conflicts during his career. He had gray hair and tired eyes, but his mind was still sharp. He had seen what war could do to planets and to people. He had hoped humanity would never need to answer a call like this. But hope was a luxury that admirals could not afford. Commander Par Ji-yeon entered his quarters without knocking. She had served under him for 15 years, and she knew him better than anyone else in the fleet. She was 45 years old with short black hair and a scar on her left cheek from a battle that neither of them liked to remember. "They are asking for 500 ships minimum," she said. Tai-Hyan nodded. He had read the request. The Coalition expected every member species to send at least 500 vessels to the staging zone. The war against the Veldaran would require the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. "How many ships are the others sending?" he asked. Ji-yeon pulled up the data on her tablet. "The Korath Confederacy is sending 800. The Melvini Republic is sending 650. The Threll Dominion is sending over 1,000. Every major power is emptying their shipyards, and the minor powers, even the smallest civilizations, are sending at least 100 ships. Everyone is terrified of the Veldaran." Tai-Hyan understood their fear. The Veldaran were not just conquerors, they were exterminators. When they took a planet, they did not enslave the population or demand tribute. They simply killed everything that moved and stripped the world of resources. Their empire grew fat on the corpses of entire species. "We will send 1 ship," he said. Ji-yeon did not react. She had expected this answer. She had served on that ship for 10 years before her promotion, and she knew exactly what it could do. "The Coalition will be insulted," she said. "Let them be insulted. They will think we are cowards. They will learn otherwise." Ji-yeon allowed herself a small smile. She had seen the ancestral fury in action during a border skirmish 7 years ago. A group of pirates had attacked a human colony with 30 ships. The fury had destroyed all 30 in less than 4 minutes. "I will inform the crew," she said. "Do that, and tell Ambassador Yoon to prepare for a difficult reception." 3 days later, the Coalition staging zone was filled with ships from every corner of the galaxy. There were over 9,000 vessels gathered in the space around a dead star, and more were arriving every hour. The largest ships belonged to the Threll Dominion, and they measured nearly 4 kilometers from bow to stern. They were considered the most powerful warships in known space. Ambassador Yoon Ijin stood before the Coalition Council and endured their mockery with dignity. She was 58 years old, with silver streaked hair and a face that revealed nothing of her thoughts. She had spent 30 years as a diplomat, and she had learned long ago that patience was more powerful than anger. "One ship," the Threll ambassador said with disgust. His name was too complex for human tongues, so she simply called him by his title. "You send 1 ship while our people die. 1 is sufficient." Hyjin replied. The council chamber erupted in noise. Alien voices shouted in a dozen different languages, and the translation systems struggled to keep up. The representatives were furious. They had expected humanity to prove itself as a worthy member of the Coalition. Instead, the newcomers had sent a single vessel. It was an insult beyond measure. The Korath ambassador rose from his seat. He was a tall creature covered in blue scales, and his eyes burned with anger. "You humans have been part of this coalition for only 50 years, he said. You have not earned the right to send so few ships. We have earned more than you know. Hyjin said calmly. The Melvini representative laughed. The Melvini were a small species with large eyes and delicate limbs, and they were known for their cruel sense of humor. Perhaps the humans are simply cowards, she said. Perhaps they hope we will fight and die while they hide behind their single shiffy Jin felt her patience wearing thin, but she did not let it show. She had been warned that this would happen. Admiral Kim had told her to expect ridicule and scorn. He had also told her to wait, just wait. He had said, they will understand when they see it. She waited. The council continued to argue for another hour. They discussed battle plans and supply lines and the positioning of their fleets. The Terran ship was not included in any of their strategies. They considered it irrelevant. Then the sensors detected something strange. A Thrall officer looked at his instruments and frowned. The readings made no sense. He recalibrated his equipment and checked again. The results were the same. There is something wrong, he announced. The council fell silent. Our long-range sensors are detecting a mass signature at the edge of the system, the officer continued. But the readings cannot be correct. What? Do you mean the Thrall ambassador demanded according to our instruments? There is a single object approaching that masses more than our entire fleet combined. The council members looked at each other in confusion. Such a reading was impossible. No ship could be that large. Ambassador Yoon Hyjin smiled. For the first time since the meeting began, that would be our ship, she said. View screen at the front of the chamber activated and showed the space at the edge of the system. At first there was nothing but stars. Then something blocked out the light. It emerged from faster than light travel like a monster rising from the deep. The stars behind it vanished one by one as its massive hull passed in front of them. It was not a ship in any sense that the coalition understood. It was a weapon-given form. The TRS Ancestral Fury had arrived. The council chamber went completely silent. Every alien in the room stared at the view screen with expressions of shock and disbelief. The Thrall ambassador, whose species had built the largest warships in the galaxy, sat down heavily in his chair. His scales had turned pale. 27 kilometers. The sensor officer whispered, the ship is 27 kilometers long. Hyjin watched their faces. She watched the mockery drain away and be replaced by something else. Something that looked very much like fear. She thought about the message Admiral Kim had sent her before she left Earth. He had told her that humanity had spent 10,000 years learning how to destroy. He had told her that when humans finally stopped fighting each other, they took all of that knowledge and built something that would ensure they never had to fight alone again. The coalition had sent thousands of ships. Humanity had sent one. And as the Ancestral Fury took its position at the heart of the Allied fleet, casting a shadow over vessels that had seemed so large just moments before Ambassador Yoon Hyjin delivered her message to the council. You asked for our help, she said. We are here. The silence in the coalition command center lasted for a very long time. Every officer on every ship in the fleet had stopped what they were doing to stare at their view screens. The Ancestral Fury hung in space like a sleeping giant, and its black hull seemed to drink in the light from the distant stars. Nothing in the recorded history of the galaxy had ever been built on such a scale. Lieutenant Baek Seung-min stood at his station on the bridge of the Fury and ran his fingers across the tactical display. His job was to monitor the weapon systems and write. Now every single one of them was showing green. He was 34 years old, and he had trained for this position his entire adult life, but he had never actually seen the ship fire its main guns in a real battle. Today might be different. Admiral Kim Tae-hein sat in the command chair at the center of the bridge and watched the coalition fleet through the main view screen. He could see their ships scattered across the system like toys in a bathtub. The largest of them looked small enough to fit inside one of the Fury's hangar bays. Open a channel to Coalition Command, he said. Communications officer, a young woman named Seo Hana, nodded and her fingers danced across her Console channel open. Admiral Tae-hyun leaned forward slightly. This is Admiral Kim Tae-hyun of the Terran Republic ship Ancestral Fury. We have received your request for assistance, and we are prepared to offer our full support. Please provide us with tactical information regarding the Veldran fleet. There was no response for nearly a minute. Then a voice came through the speakers. It belonged to the Threll Admiral, who commanded the coalition forces. His name was impossible for humans to pronounce, so the translation system simply called him Fleet Commander Admiral Kim. The fleet commander said slowly, "We were not expecting a ship of this size." Tae-hyun allowed himself a small smile. "Humanity prefers to be prepared." "That is an understatement, Chief." Engineer Choi Da-hee listened to the exchange from her station in the main engineering bay, deep within the ship. The bay was enormous, larger than most sports stadiums on Earth, and it housed the 12 primary reactors that powered the Fury. Each reactor was capable of generating enough energy to run a small moon, and right now all 12 were operating at full capacity. She was 41 years old, with calloused hands and oil stains on her uniform that never seemed to wash out completely. She had spent 20 years of her life maintaining this ship, and she knew every system, every conduit, and every bolt. She loved the Fury, the way some people love their children. "Are the reactors?" her assistant asked a young man named Oh Jun-ho, who had only been assigned to the ship 6 months ago, running perfectly. He replied. "They always do." Jun-ho looked around the massive engineering bay with wide eyes. He had studied the Fury during his training, but nothing had prepared him for the reality of serving aboard it. The ship was so large that it had its own internal transportation system, including trains that ran through tunnels in the hull. It took almost an hour to travel from the bow to the stern. "Is it true that this ship took 200 years to build?" He nodded. Construction started before the first humans set foot on Mars. It was built in secret in the asteroid belt, using resources from 17 different moons. Why did they keep it secret? Because if anyone had known what we were building, they would have tried to stop us. He smiled. Some people thought it was too much, too extreme. They said humanity did not need a weapon this powerful. What changed? Nothing changed. We simply finished building it, and by then it was too late to argue on the bridge. Admiral Kim was reviewing the tactical data that the coalition had finally sent over. The Veldran Empire had 800 warships in their invasion fleet, and they were currently 3 days away from the staging zone. They had already destroyed 4 coalition scout groups, and they showed no signs of slowing down. Commander Park Gi-yan stood beside the Admiral and studied the same data. She did not like what she saw. "Their fleet is larger than we expected," she said. Tae-hyun nodded, "but still smaller than ours. That is not what concerns me. Look at their formation. They are not spreading out. They are staying tight and moving fast. You think they know something we do not. Think they are confident. And that worries me. The Veldran were not stupid. They had conquered 17 star systems by being smart and brutal at the same time. If they were approaching a combined fleet of over 9,000 ships with only 800 of their own, they must have a reason." "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from the coalition flagship," Lieutenant Beak announced. Put it through. The view screen flickered and showed the interior of the Thrall command ship. The fleet commander stood in the center of a circular bridge surrounded by his officers. His scales were a deep green color, and his eyes were focused directly on the camera. "Admiral Kim," he said, "we have completed our analysis of your vessel," and the fleet commander paused as if searching for the right words. "We owe you an apology. We did not believe that humanity possessed such capabilities. We assumed your species was still too young and too inexperienced to contribute meaningfully to this war." Tae-hyun said nothing. He simply waited. "We were wrong," the fleet commander continued. "Your ship is the most powerful vessel we have ever encountered. Our scientists estimate that it could defeat our entire fleet in combat without suffering significant damage. That estimate is probably correct." Tae-hyun replied. The fleet commander blinked his large eyes slowly. I ask why humanity built such a thing, because we remember what we are capable of, Taehyun said. We spent 10,000 years killing each other. We burned our own cities and poisoned our own world. We invented weapons that could destroy everything we had built in a single flash of light. And when we finally found peace, we swore that we would never be helpless again. The fleet commander was silent for a moment. Then he spoke again. Admiral Kim, I am transferring tactical command of this engagement to you. Your ship will lead the assault. Taehyun had expected this. He accepted the responsibility with a simple nod. We will not let you down, he said. The transmission ended. Yeon looked at the admiral with concern in her eyes. The entire fleet, she said. They are putting the entire fleet under your command. They're scared, Taehyun replied. And scared people look for someone to follow. You're not scared? Taehyun thought about the question. For a moment, he thought about the Veldaran and their 800 ships. He thought about the 17 star systems they had burned and the billions of lives they had taken. He thought about what would happen if humanity failed here today. No, he said finally, I am not scared. I am angry. He turned to face the bridge crew. His officers looked back at him with steady eyes. They had trained for this moment their entire careers. They were ready. All hands, Taehyun announced, his voice carrying through every speaker on the ship. This is the Admiral. The enemy will arrive in 3 days. We will use that time to prepare. Our mission is simple. We will meet the Veldaran fleet, and we will destroy it completely. Humanity did not build this ship to lose. We built it to win, and that is exactly what we are going to do. The crew responded with silence at first. Then, slowly the sound began to build. It started as a murmur and grew into a roar. The men and women of the ancestral fury raised their voices in a cheer that echoed through the corridors of the massive vessel. 3 days later, when the Veldaran fleet finally arrived, they found the coalition ships waiting in perfect formation, and at the center of that formation, blotting out the stars behind, it stood the ancestral fury. The Terrans were ready for war. The night before the battle, a group of coalition officers requested permission to board the ancestral fury. They wanted to see the ship with their own eyes, and they wanted to understand how humanity had built something so impossible. Admiral Kim granted their request. Lieutenant Commander Shin Yunwoo was assigned to guide them through the vessel. She was 39 years old, with long black hair that she kept tied back in a tight bun, and she served as the ship's official historian. Her job was to maintain records of every mission and every crew member, and to remember the lessons of the past. The coalition delegation consisted of 12 officers from 6 different species. They gathered in the main hangar bay and stared up at the ceiling that stretched so far above them it was lost in shadow. The bay was large enough to hold a small city, and it contained thousands of fighter craft and support vessels. This is one of 14 hangar bays, Yunwoo explained. We can deploy 50,000 autonomous drones and another 10,000 piloted fighters. The Korath officer shook his head in disbelief. His blue scales rippled with emotion. How, he asked. How did your species build something like this? Wu had been expecting the question. She had given this tour many times before, and the question was always the same. Follow me, she said. I will show you. She led them through the ship using the internal rail system. The journey took almost 2 hours, and during that time she explained the history of the ancestral fury. The ship was born from tragedy, she began. 250 years ago, humanity almost destroyed itself. We had weapons that could crack the crust of our planet, and we came within minutes of using them. The war was stopped at the last moment, but the experience changed us. We realized that we could not continue as we were. What happened? The Melviny officer asked. Her large eyes were fixed on Yunwoo with intense curiosity. We united, Yunwoo replied, not easily and not quickly, but eventually we became one species with one government. We put aside our differences, and we started to build a future together. Delegation passed through the crew quarters, where thousands of humans lived and worked. The corridors were wide and well lit, and the crew members they passed nodded respectfully as the tour went by. But we did not forget our past. Yunwu continued. We remembered every war we had ever fought. We remembered every weapon we had ever invented. We remembered every lesson we had ever learned about violence and destruction. And we decided that we would use that knowledge to protect ourselves. The Threll officer spoke up. His voice was deep and resonant. You built this ship as a Dataran. Toin Wu shook her head. No, we built this ship because we knew that someday we would meet others in the galaxy. And we knew that some of those others might want to hurt us. We built this ship so that we would never be victims. The tour continued through the weapons. Lei Shan Wu showed them the kinetic bombardment systems that could accelerate tungsten rods to 90% of the speed of light. Each rod carried enough energy to punch through a planet's crust, and the ship carried over 10,000 of them. She showed them the directed energy weapons that drew power directly from the ship's reactors. These weapons could focus enough heat to cut through the core of a moon, and they could fire continuously for hours without overheating. She showed them the missile bays that contained warheads capable of tearing holes in the fabric of space itself. These weapons had never been used in combat, and Yunwu hoped they never would be. Korath officer looked sick. His scales had turned a pale shade of blue and his hands were trembling. This is too much, he whispered. No one should have this much power. Yunwu stopped walking. She turned to face the delegation, and her expression was serious. You are right, she said. No one should have this much power. But someone always does. In your history, has there ever been a time when someone did not have the ability to destroy others? The coalition officers looked at each other. None of them could answer. Humanity learned a hard lesson. Yunwu continued. Power exists whether we want it to or not. The only question is who holds it and what they do with it. We chose to build the most powerful weapon in the galaxy because we did not want anyone else to build it first. But you could use this ship to conquer. The Melvini officer said, you could make yourselves rulers of everything. We could. Yunwu agreed. But we will not. How can we trust that? Because we have already proven it, Yunwu replied. Humanity has possessed this ship for 50 years. We have never used it to threaten or to conquer. We have only used it to protect. When your coalition called for help, we answered. We are here to fight alongside you, not above you. Tour ended in the memorial chamber at the heart of the ship. The chamber was a vast circular room with walls covered in names. Millions of names etched into black stone, stretching from floor to ceiling in every direction. The light was dim and the air was cool and quiet. These are the names of every human who died in war, Yunwu said. Every soldier and every civilian from the first recorded conflict to the last. We carry them with us so that we never forget what war truly costs. The coalition officers stood in silence. They had come to this ship expecting to find a weapon. Instead, they had found something else, a monument to suffering and a promise to do better. Captain Han Min-soo was waiting for them when they returned to the hangar bay. He was 52 years old, with a stern face and gray temples, and he served as the ship's executive officer. I hope, Lieutenant Commander. Shin answered your questions, he said. The Korath officer stepped forward. I have one more question. Go ahead. Why do you call it the Ancestral Fury? Min-soo considered the question for a moment. Because it carries the anger of everyone who came before us. Every human who ever died in a war that should not have happened. Every child who grew up without parents because of violence. Every family that was torn apart by hatred. We carry their fury with. Use this, and we use it to make sure that no one else has to suffer in the same way. The Korath officer bowed his head. I think I understand now. Delegation returned to their own ships shortly after that. They did not speak much during the journey back. Each of them was lost in their own thoughts, trying to process what they had seen and heard on the bridge of the Ancestral Fury. Admiral Kim Tae-han received a message from the fleet commander. The coalition forces are ready. The message said, "We await." Your orders, Tehan looked at the tactical display. The Veldern fleet was less than 6 hours away. 800 ships carrying enough firepower to burn worlds. They were coming to destroy everything in their path. He thought about the names on the walls of the memorial chamber. He thought about all the humans who had died so that their children could reach the stars. He thought about the promise that humanity had made to itself: never again. Never again, all ships prepare for battle, he said. The enemy approaches. Let them come. We are ready. In the depths of the ancestral fury, the reactors hummed with power. The weapon systems came online one by one. The crew took their positions and waited. History of humanity had led to this moment. 10,000 years of war and suffering and hard lessons had created the species that now stood ready to defend the galaxy. They would not fail. They could not fail. The ancestors were watching. The Veldern fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel like a swarm of angry insects. 800 warships spread across the void in a pattern designed for maximum destruction. Their hulls were dark red, the color of dried blood, and their weapons were already charging on the bridge of the lead Veldern destroyer. The war chief studied the enemy formation with contempt. He was a massive creature, covered in thick armor plates, with 6 arms and eyes that burned with hunger. His species had conquered 47 worlds, and they had never lost a major battle. He counted the coalition ships, 9,000 vessels from dozens of species. It was the largest fleet ever assembled against his people. It would not be enough. Destroy them, he ordered. Leave. Nothing alive. The Veldern fleet surged forward. Their engines flared bright as they accelerated toward the coalition line. They had expected the enemy to scatter and run. Instead, the coalition ships held their position. They seemed to be waiting for something. Then the war chief noticed the shadow at the center of the enemy formation. There was a patch of space where no stars shone. It was as if something had swallowed the light itself. He adjusted his sensors and tried to get a reading on the anomaly. The results made no sense. That cannot be right. He growled, "Run the scan again." His officers obeyed. The results came back the same. There was a single object at the center of the enemy fleet, and it was larger than anything the Veldern had ever encountered. 27 kilometers, one of his officers reported. The ship is 27 kilometers long. War Chief felt something he had not experienced in decades. Dautan, the ancestral fury Admiral Kim Tae-hyun, watched the enemy approach. With calm eyes, he had studied the Veldern for months. He knew their tactics and their weaknesses. He knew exactly how this battle would end all. Coalition vessels hold position, he ordered. The Fury will engage a lone fleet commander. Are you certain? The voice of the Thrall Admiral came through the communication system. We can support your attack. That will not be necessary. Tae-hyun replied. Your ships would only get in the way. He turned to his tactical officer. Lieutenant Baek Soo-min was already at his station with his hands hovering over the weapons controls. His face was pale, but his eyes were steady. Status report. Tae-hyun said, all weapon systems online. Soo-min replied, kinetic batteries are loaded and ready. Directed energy weapons are at full charge. Drone bays report 50,000 units prepared for deployment. Shield's chief engineer, Choi Tae-hee, answered from her station in the engineering bay. All 12 shield generators are operating at maximum capacity. Barrier strength is at 100%. Tae-hyun nodded. He pressed a button on his command chair, and his voice echoed through every corridor of the ship hall. Hands, this is the Admiral. The enemy has arrived. Our mission is simple. We will advance alone into their fleet. We will absorb their fire. We will show them what humanity has built, and then we will destroy them completely. There will be no retreat and no surrender. The Veldern have burned 17 star systems. Today, they burn no more. He released the button and turned to the helm officer. Take us in full speed. The ancestral fury began to move from the outside. It looked almost peaceful. The massive ship glided forward through the void, its black hull reflecting nothing. Its engines glowed with a soft blue. Light that seemed gentle compared to the harsh flare of the Veldaran drives, but there was nothing gentle about what came next. The Veldaran opened fire first. 800 ships unleashed their weapons in a single coordinated volley, missiles and energy. Beams and kinetic rounds shrieked across the void toward the Terran vessel. The attack was massive enough to destroy a small moonet, struck the Fury's shields and vanished. The barriers absorbed the impact without visible strain. The energy dispersed across the shield surface in ripples of light and then faded. The ship did not slow down. It did not even change course. The warchief stared at his tactical display in disbelief. "Fire again," he screamed. "All weapons fire again." The Veldaran fleet unleashed a second volley, then a third, then a fourth. Each attack was as powerful as the last, and each attack was absorbed by the Fury's shields without effect on. The bridge Taehyun watched the enemy fire wash over his ship like rain on a window shield status. He asked 98%, Dahi reported from engineering. "They are barely making a dent." Good. Taehyun turned to his tactical officer. Lieutenant Beak returned fire. Sung Min had been waiting for this moment his entire career. His fingers moved across the controls with practiced precision and the ancestral. Fury spoke for the first time. The kinetic batteries fired first. Tungsten rods the size of buildings accelerated to near light speed and crossed the distance to the enemy fleet in less than a second. They struck the Veldaran ships with the force of nuclear explosions. Hulls crumpled like paper. Reactors detonated. Ships vanished in expanding clouds of debris. Then the directed energy weapons joined in beams of focused light cut across the void, slicing through Veldaran vessels like hot knives through butter. Each beam lasted only a fraction of a second, but each beam destroyed everything in its path. The drone bays opened and 50,000 autonomous fighters poured out into space. They swarmed toward the enemy fleet, overwhelming point defense systems and tearing into hull plating with their own weapons. The Veldaran had never seen anything move so fast or attack with such coordination. Weapons Officer Kwanbu Ora coordinated the firing solutions from her station. She was 37 years old with short hair and focused eyes, and she had spent 15 years training for exactly this situation. The ship's AI processed 10 million calculations per second, feeding her targeting data faster than any organic mind could handle. Primary targets eliminated. She reported moving to secondary targets. The battle, if it could even be called, that lasted 11 minutes. 11 minutes from the first shot to the last. In those 11 minutes, the ancestral Fury destroyed 800 Veldaran warships. It did not miss a single target. It did not allow a single enemy vessel to escape. Its weapons fired with mechanical precision and absolute lethality. When it was over, the space around the Coalition fleet was filled with debris. Fragments of Veldaran ships tumbled through the void, mixed with frozen atmosphere and the bodies of the dead. The red hulls that had seemed so threatening just minutes before were nothing but scrap metal. On the Fury's bridge, the crew sat in stunned silence. They had trained for this. They had simulated this battle 1,000 times, but the reality was still overwhelming damage. Report, Taehyun asked. His voice was steady. Medic Corporal Im June responded from the medical bay. 0 casualties. Admiral, minor hull damage to sections 12 through 15. Nothing critical. Shield status 89%. Dahi replied, "We barely felt it." Ahan nodded. He looked at the view screen where the Coalition fleet was still holding position. 9,000 ships had watched a single Terran vessel destroy an entire enemy armada in less time than it took to eat a meal. Open a channel to all Coalition vessels, he said. Channel openness is Admiral Kim Taehyun. The Veldaran invasion fleet has been neutralized. All enemy vessels have been destroyed. We have sustained no casualties and minimal damage. He paused for a moment, letting the words sink in. The galaxy is watching today. They will remember what happened here. They will remember that when darkness threatened, the Coalition answered. And they will remember that humanity stood with you. Let this be a message to any who would threaten peace. We are not afraid. we will not run. And we will never stop fighting for those who cannot fight for themselves. He ended the transmission. The Coalition fleet remained silent for a long time. Then slowly the communications channels began to fill with voices, alien languages from dozens of species, all saying the same thing in different ways. Thank you. Diane leaned back in his command chair and allowed himself a moment of exhaustion. The battle was over. The enemy was defeated. But he knew this was only the beginning. The Veldaran Empire still existed. Their homeworld was still out there. And they had just learned that humanity was not an enemy to be taken lightly. The war was not over. It had only just begun. The debris field stretched across 3 million kilometers of space, and it would take centuries to clear Coalition salvage vessels moved through the wreckage collecting data and samples from the destroyed Veldaran ships. Their scientists wanted to understand how the enemy technology worked. Their engineers wanted to learn from Terran weapons. Both groups found themselves overwhelmed by what they discovered. The Veldaran had been a powerful species. Their ships were well designed, and their weapons were deadly. Under normal circumstances, they would have crushed the Coalition fleet and continued their conquest across the galaxy. But they had not faced normal circumstances. They had faced humanity. Ambassador Yoon Haijin stood before the Coalition Council once again. This time, no one was laughing. The representatives of 37 species watched her in silence. Their faces showed a mixture of gratitude and something else, something that looked very much like fear. The Terran Republic is prepared to offer terms to the Veldaran Empire. She announced, "Our demands are simple. They will withdraw from all conquered systems within 72 hours. They will release all prisoners and return all stolen resources. They will agree to a permanent ceasefire and submit to Coalition monitoring. And if they refuse the thrall," Ambassador Skedhijin's expression did not change, "then the ancestral fury will visit their homeworld, and they will learn what happens to those who threaten peace." The message was transmitted to the Veldaran capital world that same day. It included footage of the battle showing their entire invasion fleet being destroyed in 11 minutes. It showed the ancestral fury emerging from the carnage without a scratch. It showed the faces of the Terran crew calm and professional as they delivered death on an industrial scale. The Veldaran High Council watched the footage in their war chamber. They had ruled their empire for 3,000 years, and they had never known defeat. They had believed themselves invincible. That belief died in 11 minutes. For 2 days they debated. Their war chiefs demanded revenge. They called for every ship in the empire to be gathered for a counterattack. They swore that the Terrans would pay for this humiliation. Then someone asked a simple question. How many ships like that do they have? No one could answer that. Veldaran surrendered in 43 hours. On the ancestral fury, Admiral Kim Tae-hein received the news. With a quiet nod, he had expected this outcome. The Veldaran were brutal, but they were not stupid. They had seen what his ship could do, and they understood that resistance was pointless. "The war is over," Commander Park Ji-yeon said. She stood beside him on the bridge, watching the Coalition celebration through the view screen. Ships from every species were flashing their lights and broadcasting messages of victory. The mood was euphoric. "This war is over," Tai-han replied. "There will be others," Ji-yeon nodded. She had served with him long enough to know that peace was always temporary. The galaxy was vast, and it contained countless species. Some of them would inevitably choose violence, but for now, at least they had one. The Coalition Council held a ceremony 3 days later. They wanted to honor the Terran crew for their victory. They wanted to celebrate the end of the Veldaran threat. They wanted to show the galaxy that the forces of civilization had triumphed. Ambassador Yoon Haijin attended the ceremony, but Admiral Kim did not. He remained on his ship preparing for the journey home. He did not enjoy celebrations, and he did not consider himself a hero. He was just a soldier who had done his job. During the ceremony, a young Korath officer approached Commander Park Ji-yeon. The officer was barely out of training with bright blue scales and eyes full of curiosity. "Commander May, I ask you a question," Jia nodded. "Go ahead. Do you have more ships like the ancestral Farijian considered?" The question carefully. She thought about the 17 other vessels currently under construction in hidden shipyards across human space. She thought about the plans for even larger ships that were still on the drawing boards. She thought about the promise humanity had made to itself that they would never be caught unprepared. She smiled politely. One was sufficient. The Karth. Officer nodded, but his eyes showed that he understood what she had not said. The Terrans were not showing everything. They were holding back. The coalition members understood this too, as they watched the ancestral Fury prepare to depart. They realized something important about the humans who had joined their community. These newcomers were not just another species seeking trade and friendship. They were something else entirely. They were protectors, whether the galaxy wanted them or not. The journey home took 3 weeks. The ancestral Fury traveled through coalition space, and everywhere it went, ships moved aside to let it pass. Word of the battle had spread across every inhabited world. Every species knew what the Terran vessel had done. Some saw it as salvation, a power that would defend the innocent against those who would do harm. Others saw it as a threat, a weapon too terrible to exist, controlled by a species too young to be trusted. Both views contained truth. On the final night before reaching Earth, Admiral Kim Taehan visited the memorial chamber alone. He walked slowly along the walls, reading the names etched into the black stone. Millions of names, stretching back through thousands of years of human history, stopped at one section where the names were more recent. These were the soldiers who had died during the last human war, the war that had almost ended everything. The war that had taught humanity to either unite or perish. His grandfather's name was there. Third row from the bottom. "We did it," Taihan said softly. "We found others out there, and some of them wanted to hurt people just like we used to hurt each other. But we stopped them. We used everything you taught us, and we stopped them." He stood in silence for a long time. Then he straightened his uniform and walked back to the bridge. The ancestral Fury entered Earth orbit the next morning. The planet hung below them, blue and green and beautiful. The cities sparkled on the night side, and the oceans gleamed in the sunlight. It was home. The crew was given leave to visit their families. Most of them had not seen Earth in years. The Fury spent most of its time in deep space, patrolling the borders of human territory and responding to threats. They had earned a rest, but Taehan knew the rest would not last. Already reports were coming in of other species watching humanity with new interest. Some wanted to form alliances. Others wanted to understand how the Terrans had built such a powerful ship. Still others were quietly building up their own forces, preparing for the day when they might have to face the ancestral Fury themselves. The galaxy had changed. The balance of power had shifted, and humanity stood at the center of it all. Commander Park. Ji Yeon found the Admiral on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. She stood beside him in comfortable silence for a while before speaking. "What happens now?" "Now we wait," Taihan replied. "Someone else will threaten the peace eventually. They always do, and when they do, we will be ready." "Do you ever wonder if we built too much? If the Fury is more than we need?" "Every day," Taihan admitted. "But then I remember what we almost did to ourselves. I remember how close we came to ending everything. And I know that it is better to have too much power and not need it than to need power and not." Abaji nodded. She looked out at the stars and thought about all the species living among them. Billions of beings on thousands of worlds, each with their own hopes and fears and dreams. "They are afraid of us now," she said. "Good," Taehyun replied. "Let them be afraid. Fear keeps people honest. It reminds them that actions have consequences. And maybe, just maybe, it will make them think twice before starting the next war." He turned away from the window and walked toward the door. "Come on," he said. "We have work to do. The galaxy is not going to protect itself." The Aeon followed him, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, the ancestral fury waited. It carried the names of 1,000,000 dead on its walls and the fury of 1,000 generations in its heart. It was a weapon and a warning and a promise, all wrapped in 27 kilometers of black steel. Humanity had built it to remember. Humanity had built it to protect. And now the galaxy knew what happened when you threatened those under human protection. They wondered why Terrans sent just one ship. Now they understood one was enough. One would always be enough.